Hello. Today I am going to bore you to sleep. I'm going to be reading this long, boring rule book for Star Wars Rebellion. It is very dry, and I guarantee you're going to fall asleep. Let's begin. This document is intended as a reference for all rules queries. It's recommended that players begin playing Star Wars Rebellion by reading the Learn to Play booklet in its entirety first. But I'm not going to do that today. I'm just reading this book, so you're not going to know what's going on. The majority of this reference is the glossary. The glossary has definitions and clarifications for all gameplay topics. Use the index on page 16 of this document to find any topics that do not have their own entry in the glossary. Page 15 of this document has an in-depth reference for game setup. There are action cards. For example, they're used for recruiting leaders and providing special abilities to leaders. Each action card can only be used once per game. During setup, the player receives 2 random starting action cards. And when they use an action card, you flip the card face up, resolve its ability, and then return it to the game box. The bold phrase above the ability specifies when the card can be used, like an assignment, start of combat, immediate, or special. Activating systems. Activating a system using a leader is how players move their units and initiate combat during the command phase. To activate a system, follow these steps. 1. Place the leader. The player takes a leader from his leader pool and places it in any system. A system that already contains a leader can be activated. However, a player cannot move his units out of a system that contains one of his faction's leaders. 2. Move units. The player can move his units from adjacent systems to this system. If there's not enough room to physically fit all units in the system, place the units near the system's border. At the end of combat, move any surviving units into the system. 3. Reveal base. If Imperial ground units moved into a system, the rebel player must declare whether the base is in the system. If so, the base is revealed. For combat, if there are Imperial and Rebel units both in the same system and the same theater, they resolve combat. And 5. Subjugate. If there's an Imperial ground unit in the system and it does not have Imperial loyalty, place a subjugation marker there. Next is the assignment phase. During the assignment phase, players choose which leaders they wish to assign to which missions. To assign a leader to a mission, the player takes a mission card from his hand and places it face down near his faction sheet. Then he chooses 1 or 2 leaders from his leader pool and places them on top of the card. The rebel players start by assigning any of his leaders to missions. When the rebel player is finished, the Imperial player assigns any of his leaders to missions. All leaders not assigned to missions stay in the leader pool. Mission cards are not revealed during the assignment phase. A player can assign up to 2 leaders to a mission, even if doing so is not one of the mission requirements. Attachment rings. Attachment rings are attached to leaders and provide an effect, either beneficial or detrimental. Some card abilities attach rings onto leaders. When a ring is attached to a leader, press the leader's stand into the ring. The ring's effect is explained on its corresponding card. A leader can have only 1 ring at a time. If a leader gains a 2nd ring, remove the previous one. If an attachment ring is removed from a leader, it is returned to the supply and its effect no longer applies to that leader. Attack values. Each unit's attack values are defined on its faction sheet. A unit can have a black attack value, a red attack value, both, or none. During combat, the player rolls dice equal to the sum of all his participating units' attack values. Build units. When the time marker advances to a space that has a build icon, players build units. To build units, players simultaneously build. Each player places 1 unit on his build queue for each resource icon in his loyal and subjugated systems. The number next to the icon indicates the space on which the units are placed. For subjugated systems, only use the first or leftmost icon. Units placed on the build queue come from the supply of unused components. A player cannot use a system's resource icons to build units if his opponent has a unit in the system. The rebel player can also use the resource icons in the rebel base space to build units unless the base is revealed and the Imperial player has a unit or loyalty in the system. The rebel player can also use the resource icons in the rebel base space to build units unless the base is revealed and the Imperial player has a unit or loyalty in the system. The Rebel faction sheet has multiple options for blue triangle and orange square units. When the Rebel player builds one of these units, he chooses one unit of this type to place on his build queue. During each refresh phase, each unit slides down one space down the build queue toward its owner's edge of the game board. When a unit slides off the board from the one space, that unit is deployed. When an ability allows the player to place units on the build queue, these units are taken from the supply. If the ability is resolved in a system, it can be performed even if there is a sabotage marker in the system. Capital ships. A ship that has a red health value is a capital ship. The Death Star is not a capital ship. It is a space station. Captured leaders. Some Imperial card abilities capture rebel leaders. When a leader is captured, attach the captured ring to the leader. Captured leaders do not oppose missions, cannot return to the leader pool, and cannot be moved by the rebel player. Captured leaders do not prevent rebel units from moving out of their system. The Imperial player can move a captured leader as if they were a ground unit, but it does not count towards transport capacity. If a second leader receives the captured leader ring, the first leader is rescued, and the ring is attached to the new leader. A leader with the carbonite attachment ring is still a captured leader. It can be rescued and targeted by any card that affects captured leaders. If the leader is rescued, the rebels do not regain the reputation lost from the carbonite freezing mission. Captured leaders do not provide their tactic values in combat. Cheating. Although a player may try to bluff and mislead his opponent about his intentions and the location of the rebel base, there are a few rules that must always be observed. If an ability requires the rebel player to resolve an effect in the rebel base's system, not the rebel base space, he must do so in the rebel base's actual system. At the end of the game, if a player is revealed to have cheated, intentionally or accidentally, he loses the game, and his opponent wins. This includes moving from the rebel base to an illegal system, or recruiting a leader that does not match the action cards he chose. Combat. When a player moves units to a system that contains his opponent's unit, a combat is resolved. Combat is only resolved if both players have units in the same system. Add the leader. Step 1. If a player does not have a leader with tactic values in the system, he may only take one leader from his leader pool and place it in the system. Step 2. Draw tactic cards. Each player draws space tactic cards according to his leader's space tactic values and ground tactic cards according to his leader's ground tactic value. Number 3. Combat round. Players resolve a combat round in which each unit performs one attack. To resolve a combat round, follow these steps. 1. Space battle. The current player resolves one attack with all of his ships, and then his opponent resolves one attack with all of his ships. 2. Ground battle. The current player resolves one attack with all of his ground units, and then his opponent resolves one attack with all of his ground units. 3. Retreat. Starting with the current player, each player has an option to retreat. 4. Next round. If both factions still have units in the same theater, space or ground, they resolve another combat round, starting with the space battle step. Otherwise, the combat ends. Ending combat. Combat ends if both factions do not have units in the same theater after resolving the last step of a combat round. For example, if the Imperial player has only ground units and the Rebel player has only space units in the system, combat ends. At the end of combat, players discard all tactic cards from their hands, then shuffle all tactic cards back into their decks. At the end of combat, remove all damage markers assigned to units and place them back in the supply. Resolving an attack. To resolve an attack with space or ground units, follow these steps. 1. Roll the dice. The player rolls dice matching the color and quantity of the attack values of all his participating units. 2. Combat actions. The player can perform combat actions to draw tactic cards or play tactic cards. 3. Assign damage. The player chooses which units to assign his damage by placing his dice next to them. 4. Block damage. The opponent can play tactic cards to block damage assigned to his units. For each damage blocked, reveal one damage that was assigned to one of its units, either from a die or a card. 5. Destroy units. For each unit that has damage assigned to its equal to or exceeding its health is placed on the player's faction sheet and is destroyed at the end of this combat step. Units on a player's faction sheet still attack this combat round. Retreating. To retreat from combat, the player must take one of his leaders from the system and place it in an adjacent system. Then he takes his units from the system and moves them to that leader's system following normal movement and transport rules. A player must choose to retreat to a system that contains his units or one of his loyalty markers. If able, he cannot retreat to a system that contains his opponent's units. A player cannot retreat if his opponent does not have any units in the system. The Imperial player cannot retreat any units if he has a Death Star or Death Star under construction in the combat. When a player retreats, he must move all of his ships out of the system. The player can choose to leave ground units and TIE fighters behind in the system. Each player can only retreat from each combat once even if he has multiple leaders in the system. A player can retreat with any one of his leaders in the system, even if it does not have tactic values. Winning a battle. Some cards require a player to win a battle. A player wins a battle if his opponent does not have any units from the same theater in the system where the battle occurred. For example, a player wins a space battle if his opponent's last ship is destroyed. Command phase. During the command phase, players take turns activating systems or revealing missions. Component limitations. If players run out of a component type during the game, they should obey the following rules. Dice. Each player can roll a maximum of 5 black dice and 5 red dice in each mission or attack. Markers and rings. Leaders and attachment rings are limited to those included in the game. Units. Units are limited to those included in the game. A player cannot build a unit type if there are none available. Cards. When a card deck becomes depleted, shuffle the deck's discard pile and place it face down to create a new one. Damage. Units can be assigned damage in combat. After applying blocks, if the unit has damage equal to or exceeding its health, it is destroyed. Death Star. The Death Star is an immensely powerful unit that follows all rules pertaining to ships, except those listed below. The Death Star does not have a health value and cannot be assigned or dealt damage. The Imperial player cannot retreat one of its units if he has a Death Star or Death Star under construction in the combat. The Death Star and Death Star under construction are a type of ship known as a space station. They are not capital ships or structures. Building a Death Star. The Construct Death Star card allows the Imperial player to build a second Death Star. When this card is resolved, the player places a Death Star under construction in the mission system and places a completed Death Star in space 3 of his build queue. Destroying a Death Star. During the space battle step of a combat round, after both factions have resolved their attacks and units are destroyed, the rebel player can reveal a Death Star Plans objective card from his hand. If the rebel player has at least one fighter in the system, he rolls 3 dice. If he rolls at least one hit, the Death Star is destroyed. The rebel player discards the card and gains the reputation shown on the card. Deploy units. During step 6 of the refresh phase, each player slides all units down the build queue 1 space. Any units that slide from the 1 space off the board are ready to be deployed. The player places these units in any of his loyal or subjugated systems. Each player can deploy a maximum of 2 units to each system during each refresh phase. The Super Laser Online mission card can destroy an entire system. When a system is destroyed, place a destroyed system marker in the system and destroy all rebel ground units in the system. When a unit is destroyed, it is removed from the game board and returned to the supply. Dice are used to resolve combat and opposed missions. There are 3 results found on dice: hit, direct hit, and special. Diplomacy is a skill provided by some leaders and required by some missions. Diplomacy missions often provide loyalty in systems or give players more units. A few abilities can cause a leader to be eliminated. When this happens, the leader is taken from its current location and returned to the game box. It cannot be used for the rest of the game. Health values. Each unit has a health value present in a circle on its faction sheet. This is the minimum amount of damage required to destroy the unit. An Imperial system is any system that has an Imperial loyalty marker or subjugation marker on it. Intel is a skill provided by some leaders and required by some missions. Rebel Intel missions often help acquire objective cards, while Imperial Intel missions usually help find the Rebel base. Players use leaders to move units and attempt missions. Skill icons on leaders indicate which missions they can reveal. Tactic values on leaders indicate how many tactic cards of each type they draw at the start of combat. Logistics. Logistics is a skill provided by some leaders and required by some missions. Rebel logistics missions typically move units to and from the base, while Imperial missions often allow them to build special units or accelerate how quickly they can build. Each system has a loyalty, which represents whom the population of the system support. The current loyalty of a system is indicated by which loyalty marker is in the system. If there is no loyalty marker in the system, then that system is a neutral system. During the assignment phase, players can assign leaders to mission cards. During the command phase, these missions can be revealed. To reveal a mission, perform the following steps. 1. Flip card face up. The player flips one of his mission cards face up and reads the card aloud. 2. Choose the system. The player chooses where he is resolving the mission, following the instruction on the card. He places all leaders that were assigned to the mission in that system. 3. Attempt or resolve. If the card reads attempt, the mission can be opposed. Proceed to step 4. If it reads resolve, the mission cannot be opposed. Skip to step 6. 4. Send leader to oppose. The player's opponent may choose one leader and his own leader pool to place in the system. 5. Opposition. If the player's opponent does not have any leaders in the system, then the mission automatically succeeds. Skip to step 6. Step 6. Mission success. As long as the mission did not fail during step 5, the player performs the ability on the mission card. Step 7. Discard or return to hand. After using a starting mission card, it returns to the player's hand. All other mission cards, including projects, are discarded after use. Any system that does not have a Rebel loyalty marker, Imperial loyalty marker, or subjugation marker is a neutral system. Each system that has at least one resource icon and a loyalty space is a populous system. The probe deck contains one card for each system in the game except Coruscant. These cards are used to determine system loyalty during setup, and the Rebel player uses these cards to secretly choose where the Rebel base is located. During setup, the Rebel player secretly chooses a system for his Rebel base. The system's probe card is placed face down under the location space of the game board. When an ability refers to the Rebel base space, it is referring to the space on the game board labeled Rebel base, not the base's system. If the Imperial player ever has loyalty or ground units in the Rebel base's system, the Rebel player must reveal the Rebel base. When the base is revealed, the Rebel player flips the probe card in the location space face up and places it on the Rebel base space. All units and leaders in the Rebel base space are placed in the system shown on the probe card. The probe card remains face up on the Rebel base space to remind players that the base is revealed. Systems. Each system consists of planet artwork, the space area around the planet, and its name. Populous systems also contain resource icons in a loyalty space. Each system not only represents the single planet depicted in the artwork, but also nearby moons, space stations, and other planets in the system. If any ability refers to the closest system, players count how many times a unit would need to move to reach the system. If there is a tie, the player resolving the ability chooses. Tactic cards are drawn during combat and have a wide range of special abilities that can help a player during combat. At the start of combat, each player draws tactic cards according to his leader's tactic values. Players can draw additional tactic cards by spending hit die results. Tactic cards are not revealed in the player's opponent until played. All discarded ground and space tactic cards are reshuffled into their respective decks at the end of each combat. When playing with more than 2 players, up to 2 players control each team. They split the responsibilities between each other, with one player as the admiral and the other as the general. Players use the team game side of their faction sheet, which has separate leader pools for each player. During a 3-player game, a single rebel player uses the team game side of his faction sheet and controls both the admiral and the general role. Players on the same team can share as much information as they like. They can show each other cards without showing their opponents, but all discussion must take place openly in front of their opponents. They can talk in code or whisper, but they cannot leave the room to have private discussions. Rules specific to the team game appear in various parts of the rules reference preceded by the team game header. Theater. Star Wars Rebellion contains 2 theaters of war, space and ground. Each unit attacks in one of the 2 theaters, and most leaders have tactic values that correspond to each theater. When assigning and dealing damage during a battle, players can only deal damage to units in the same theater. For example, if players are resolving the space combat step, they cannot assign or deal damage to ground units. The time marker starts on the 1 space of the time jack and advances 1 space at the end of each game round. If the time marker is ever in the same space as the reputation marker, the rebel player immediately wins the game. To move ground units and TIE fighters, the player must have enough transport capacity. A ship's transport capacity is presented on its faction sheet in a black box near the unit's icon. Each ground unit or TIE fighter takes up 1 capacity. All plastic miniatures in the game are units. The capabilities and names of each unit are shown on the faction sheet. Here's a list of all units included in Star Wars Rebellion. Imperial units: 24 TIE fighters, 8 assault carriers, 8 Star Destroyers, 2 Super Star Destroyers, 2 Death Stars, 1 Death Star under construction, 30 Stormtroopers, 10 AT-STs, 4 AT-ATs, Rebel units, 8 X-Wings, 12 Y-Wings, 4 Corellian Corvettes, 4 Rebel transports, 3 Mon Cala cruisers, 21 Rebel troopers, 6 air speeders, 3 shield generators, 3 ion cannons. When a rule refers to a player's units, this includes all ship and ground units belonging to the player's team. Each faction has unique win conditions. The Imperial player wins the game immediately if there are Imperial units in the Rebel base's system and there are no Rebel units in the system. The Imperial player can only win if the Rebel base is revealed or its system is destroyed. The Imperial player can only win if the Rebel base is revealed or its system is destroyed. I just read that. If the Rebel base's system is destroyed, the Imperial player immediately wins the game. The Rebel player wins the game immediately if the reputation marker is in the same space as the time marker. This is the end of the rules. I think that they were sufficiently boring, and I hope that you agree. If you like this sort of video, let me know in the comments and I can make more. I have an endless supply of board games and an endless supply of rule books that I can read. I can also make actually interesting videos about these board games if that's the sort of thing you like. Maybe I can play one for you. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, leave me a comment or a like and let me know. And make sure that you subscribe or join my Discord so you can get notifications of new boring videos for you. I hope you're asleep. If you're not, I'm be quite shocked. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you in my next video.